Hello, listeners, from Roy Damari of INSAM. Now, the antics of Donald Trump as the president, the minority elected president of the United States, are becoming more and more disconcerting. But in a way, after this business of appointing the special prosecutor or investigator to see what the story is or is not about Russian interference with the election process, I think I have to say I'm beginning to admire not the president, far from it, but the actual American system. Because what we've seen is a certain robustness, and that when Trump does try to violate the Constitution or do his own thing without reference to anybody else, or to act precipitately without too much reflection, I'm beginning to see this robustness of the American system. The fact that they elect a minority president is bizarre. The observation that the um, check and balances system does actually lead to a kind of freezing of government is odd. But nevertheless, this same check and balance system is now working, and I have to take my hat off to them. They are, through this system, trying to keep some control on the antics of their president. For the Americans, I was very pleased to see that they have, as I suggested last week, I may boast, appointed a special prosecutor to give real independence to the investigation about the Russian connection, which, if it clears Trump and his team, is a perfectly possible solution or outcome. But we have to see, you have to look to be sure that everything is under control. And just maybe we can hope that such a prosecutor will help Donald Trump understand that he is not actually a dictator, but a president of a democratic country with a system which he has to follow. You may wonder why I speak a lot about Trump. Well, it's for many reasons, but one of them is that his antics do affect our investments. This latest round was so disconcerting that it caused the stock markets, not only in the United States, but actually through much of the world, to fall significantly. So it is worth watching the political setup in the USA. But there are other reasons for this fall in the stock market. It's one I've been talking about perhaps too much for many, many months, which is that there is an inherent problem with the United States economy and others, but particularly with the US economy. And that problem is to do with indebtedness. I've often talked about this. I can't understand, any more than Mrs. Thatcher could understand those years ago, how countries can allow themselves to run up so much debt. In fact, the headline in the FT this morning is that overall debt in the United States now has gone back up to more than it was before the crash in 2008. And there is something about the economy which it says, it can't do very well. Trump and his team are supposing very high growth rates. Well, I have to tell you that Harry Dent and his team are saying high growth rates at this point in history are totally impossible. One aspect of this, which is what I picked up over the years, is that if you've got so much debt, in the end you have to run it down. You either run it down because you just see the sense of running it down, or you run it down because interest rates go up, and if they do go up, it costs far too much, and then that slows the economy because the debt gets heavier in terms of providing the interest every month or every quarter. The other reason, which is something Harry Dent studies so closely, is demographics. I probably have spoken to you about this before when I first read his book, The Demographic Cliff. His point, which I think is a very solid one, is that as people age and the baby boomers go to retirement, and even before they retire, they actually spend a lot less than when they were back in their 40s. He has followed the spending patterns of all of us, but particularly Americans, of course, to establish that the peak spending is in the period 40 to 50 years of age, when there is usually less burden in raising kids. The people have a house, but they're happy and they can spend. But then as they get older, their demands, their requirements are less, and so they spend less. And when they finally retire, they actually have less money anyway, so they are spending less. And what they're spending money on would be things like saving for retirement homes or paying for retirement homes or holidays in Florida. And that trend is sort of a huge wave going through the economy, which means that when the population reaches this aging point, it can't be so productive. A lot of people are buying things, but fewer things, and above all, there are fewer people actually producing things. So the result is the economy cannot expand at the high rates it has been expanding at over several years. So it won't happen, this 3% won't happen. And when that finally washes through to people who are hoping that the stock market will continue its great climb, its rise, then the great rise will stop. It is just possible that this latest drop is the beginning of the massive drop that Harry Dent foresees. I remain a little bit more skeptical about that. There's a tendency for drops to be followed by a kind of rebound and a return of optimism and so on. But we've now got two things going on. One is the political scene in the USA, which is dangerous as well, and we've got this demographic cliff, which the aging population will undoubtedly slow down spending and productivity. Dent and his colleagues certainly think that the stock market is now fully into bubble mode. And what he points out, which is a bit scary, is that bubbles, when they burst, do burst very completely. You don't just adjust by a few hundred points, but you find drops in indices, if you're talking about the Dow or the S&P 500, in the order of thousands of points. So that could happen. And all I can say is, be warned, be careful. It is not at all obvious that one should be jumping into the stock market at the moment. I'm rather inclined to say that a gentle withdrawal might be a better idea. There are probably some ETFs in areas you know and understand, which could suit you. I can never really recommend individual stock picking, because the more I get into trying to teach about stock prices, the more I realize how ignorant we all are. There's so much to consider, and even if you're clever enough to consider everything, the overall psychology of the market is beyond the grasp of mere mortals. Turning back to Europe, the whole Brexit and European scene is very, very difficult to grasp. I will admit it's kind of beyond me, actually. I understand the Americans better than I do the Europeans or even the Brits. We have a situation where the pound goes up and down according to whether it looks as though the UK economy is going to do better or worse as it approaches the real Brexit, as I think from just the negotiations. We can say that there is optimism in the long run, pessimism in the short run, probably, about the impact of Brexit on the UK economy. I was talking to a Swiss commentator this week, and he said for Switzerland too, of course, which is outside the European Union, it would be very nice to have a bilateral agreement with the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, we can't even begin negotiating such a thing until the basic rules and the cost of withdrawal has been negotiated, and that must be, well, it could be up to 2 years away, but I think they might have got there within about a year. I'm pretty certain that the Merkel reinforcement of her position and the Macron election as president of France are positive features for the European Union, and I wish I were in it as a UK citizen. I wish I were in it. But if we're not, I still wish them luck, and I also wish the UK not just luck, but good management. I'll be speaking to you next week, actually from Prague, where I'm attending a conference on on wood and wood processing. And so I'll be making a recording in my hotel room and keeping in touch with the events of the world beyond such things as how to get added value from forests. So I'll speak to you again next week.